And here we are, my friends, my brothers, my sisters, with part 2, where I break down this incredibly awful analogy our brother here, Philosophy Tube, decided to use. Anyhow, here's what I'm gonna do. One, as I usually try to do, I encourage you to watch this video in full, despite the fact that it is 40 minutes long. Mostly so you guys understand that anything that I cut out, I am not doing so in order to misrepresent his argument, but because I don't really think it's necessary to understand his argument. His skit here is pretty long, a little unnecessarily so, so I'm going to be trying to get mostly the gist of his analogy, or the gist of the analogy, so you guys understand it, and we'll just kind of take it from there. So I'm going to play mostly the gist of it and see if I can shave this up a little bit so we can move along with it.
Philosophy papers ever, in which she asks us to consider a very weird scenario. There's someone I want you to meet.
Jesus Christ! Who is that?
He's resting. That is Paolo Vinatoni, one of the most accomplished violinists in the world. Paolo is very sick, Tom. He has kidney failure. Unless he's given urgent dialysis, he'll surely die. And as president of the Society of Music Lovers, I can't let that happen. You have 2 beautiful kidneys, Tom. And now that you're connected to Paolo's bloodstream, you're going to help him get better.
You grabbed me from my studio and hooked me up to this guy?
No, I grabbed you from the car park. Sorry about hitting you over the head, by the way. I couldn't risk knocking you out chemically. Anything that gets into your blood will get into Paolo.
That was you. Calling my show. Why me?
I knew you'd agree with me. You're pro-life. You support everybody's right to live, no matter how inconvenient. That is what you've always said.
Yeah, I am pro-life. You can't do this without asking.
Why not? Surely Paolo's right to life outweighs your right to convenience? Thompson's argument is obviously supposed to be an analogy for pregnancy.
And it doesn't work very well, for numerous reasons. Let's start with reason number 1. The analogy itself requires that someone is forced in order to keep another human being alive, through a completely unnatural process in and of itself. For one, no matter how you guys slice it, unless you guys want to be megalomaniacal anime villains who believe that all of humanity is evil and deserves to be purged in the holy fire or hellfire, whatever demon you want to summon in order to wipe out humanity, women have to get pregnant to keep us going. I didn't choose it. You didn't choose it. It just be. That's just how it is. It be like that sometimes. Women have to get pregnant in order to continue the human species. That's just how it is. Now again, unless you want to be some random video game villain who is misanthropic and hates all of humanity and wants us all to die and purge us, I'm sorry, but that's just how it be. So we're talking about something that's not only totally outside of our control, but something that's totally required just for our species to continue to exist. Ignoring the misanthropic idiots who wish for our annihilation. If we want to keep human beings going, women have to get pregnant. That's just how it be. This analogy, on the other hand, requires us to believe that 2 people have to keep, or one person has to be attached to another person to keep that one singular person alive, just for his own sake. It's not something that's necessary or required, or not even something ordained by nature or the creator himself, even though we don't need to invoke him. It's just to keep one violinist alive. Or is the violinist the guy who is whatever? It really doesn't matter. The point being, the process is unnatural and unnecessary. Of course, not arguing that natural is good, but natural is required in order to keep us going as a species. So the analogy on its surface is asking us to look at something that is totally necessary and outside of our control, and to compare it to something that is entirely in our control and not necessary. Because one person continuing to live by absorbing the nutrients of another person, versus our species being continued through a process of creation and birth, they're just not the equivalent. But that's just number 1. It's just not natural nor necessary. But number 2, the process itself requires one person to be kidnapped and held against their will, while another process requires someone who understands exactly what they're doing. Now, let us not pretend that people do not understand what happens during sexual intercourse. And if you're having sex and you don't understand how that happens, I'm just going to say this flat out, you shouldn't be having sex. But considering the fact that most people who engage in sexual activity know that you can become pregnant, and considering the fact that that's its entire purpose and function, I know some of you people will say, no, sex is for pleasure. Well, no, eating cake is for pleasure, my friend. Playing sports, that's for pleasure. Having sex, while it might be a pleasurable act, and it might feel damn good, is not for pleasure. It's just a side effect. It's a side effect of it, but it's not the point. And it isn't to say that every time you have to have sex, you have to be trying to conceive. However, its primary purpose is to make people. That's just what it is. I didn't choose it to be that. That's just what it is, okay? There's not even a counter argument against that. If I grab a pair of scissors and I use it to open up a can, no one's going to tell me that the purpose of scissors is to open up cans and to stab people to death. No. While I can use scissors to open up a can, and I can use scissors to stab someone to death, the purpose of scissors is to cut paper. That's its point. And culinary scissors is to cut meat. See, when you change the specific function of something and what it's for, it doesn't mean you can't do anything outside of its function, but it doesn't change what its primary function is for either. So with that understanding, my brothers and my sisters, when people have sex, they know they can get pregnant. And knowing that you can get pregnant means that you're making a conscious decision to engage in that risk. So if you become pregnant, you then become responsible for that product because you knew you could create that product being your child, which is not the same as being kidnapped and then forcibly attached to some person you don't fucking know and then have to bear some responsibility for them, which will become relevant later as the video continues. But in conclusion, the analogy doesn't work for two reasons. One, keeping one singular person alive through being kidnapped and forcibly attached to them is not the same as keeping the human species going through a process that is outside of our control, or someone bearing that responsibility is outside of our control, and that's someone being women. And two, considering the fact that the process of pregnancy is totally natural, and also the process of pregnancy is something that requires two consenting adults, of course we're going to be tabling a discussion of rape for some other time, it's not the same as being kidnapped and forced to hold someone to keep one other person alive. It's just not.
And for us, the question is, if Tom Gently is unplugged from the violinist and escapes, should whoever unplugs him be punished by the law?
No. Ah, well, that was easy to answer. That was really easy to answer. I don't even... Why is this even a question to ponder? The answer is no, we shouldn't be punished. Why, you ask? Well, I'll explain. Just keep watching.
What is more important? The life of the violinist, who is definitely a full person, or the bodily autonomy of a conservative radio host held captive by a Tory maniac?
Well, neither is more important than the other. In fact, that's the wrong question to be asking. The question to be asking is, whose responsibility is it? And the responsibility is no one's. Well, it might be sad that the violinist might die if he is detached from the conservative talk show host. It's not his responsibility to keep him alive. One, he doesn't know that person. And two, he was kidnapped and forcibly attached to them, which means his bodily autonomy was straight robbed from him. However, women getting pregnant through a process that is totally natural and through their consent, considering the fact that they know it can fucking happen. What if I took preventive measures against it, like birth control and he wore a condom? Well, considering the fact that you know that you can become pregnant, it doesn't fucking change even if you try to prevent it. You know that it can happen. So it's just not the same fucking thing. It doesn't matter.
As the journalist Laurie Penny puts it, it does not matter whether fetuses are persons. It matters whether pregnant people are. You might well say that this scenario is unrealistic.
Well, it's not the fact that it's unrealistic. It's the fact that it doesn't work in principle, which I already laid out.
Not to mention, in questionable taste. And I'd agree with you. Remember, the whole reason we're considering it, though, is because we're assuming that fetuses are persons. We've already entered unrealistic. We're just seeing where the rabbit hole leads.
I guess it's unrealistic to consider fetuses are peoples because Reasons. I don't know why is that unrealistic. If I were to shoot and kill a pregnant woman with a double barrel shotgun, I would be tried for double murder, which is weird because fetuses aren't people, according to you. I mean, hell, if I were to be driving down the road and lose control of my car and slam into a pregnant woman on her way to an abortion clinic and kill the both of them, I would probably still be tried for 2 counts of manslaughter, which, according to you, wouldn't make any sense considering the fact that fetuses aren't people. So how the fuck does double murder of a pregnant woman count if fetuses aren't people? It's almost like fetuses are only people based on the independent whim of the people who want them or don't want them. Which is kind of stupid, if you were to ask me.
It's also unfortunately the case that a lot of cis men, including many lawmakers, can engage with this topic so freely because it's not a site of pain for us.
Oh, really? Having your child killed by its mother, despite the fact that you want them, is not a site of pain for us, Is it? Is that what you're trying to tell me? That if I got a woman pregnant and I want to have my children and she decided out of spite that she'd get an abortion, make sure I can't fucking have him, that it wouldn't be painful to me? Is that what the fuck you're trying to say? No, but seriously, I sometimes I wonder if people listen to the words that come out of their mouth. Are you so cruel to the emotional weight that men have to their children that you won't even accept that maybe just a little bit it might be kind of fucked up to have your child killed before it even gets to be born by a spiteful woman? Because yeah, that happens a lot, actually. I mean, even if it happens 13 times out of 150,000, that's still 13 times more than it should happen. It's not a fucking source of pain. I don't even...
As the Alabama Senate recently showed, sometimes hearing real graphic testimony just doesn't work. And so in order to bring this topic home to those people, I decided to present this admittedly very macabre fantasy. And maybe you think I stacked the deck, like the film is shot in a sex dungeon. There's a clear villain. I'm obviously leading you to the answer that I support. And yeah, okay, fair enough.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of the whole point. You're supposed to be trying to lead people towards the answer you want. I'm not knocking you for that. It's just that the analogy in principle doesn't work very well, so...
At least I admit it. If it's meant to be an analogy to pregnancy, though, we could tweak it. What if the violinist was Tom Gently's brother?
It doesn't matter.
What if Tom initially volunteered, but he wants to back out when he learns what it really involves?
That would matter. But not as much... No, that wouldn't matter. That would change a lot of things, actually. Don't worry, I'll explain after he's done.
A violinist with kidney disease. Fuck it. Let's go all in. What if it was a baby? And remember, the question here is, if someone unplugs him, should they be punished by the law?
And the answer is still no. Even if you were to take a baby and you attached it or used it surrogately and put it inside of a woman, or didn't choose to have her baby, or didn't choose to have sex, then it's not her responsibility. In the same way, it's not anyone's responsibility if they're forced to be attached to someone else, even if it was their brother. Okay, fine, enough with that accent, but honestly, let's be real here for a second now, okay? You're not owed anyone anything, and my mother makes me... She beats this into my head. People don't owe you anything. For some reason, she thinks that I think people think that, but I'll save my mother issues for some other time. The point is, you're not owed strangers, you're not even owed your own siblings anything, because they're not your product, nor are they your responsibility. Now, if you choose to attach yourself to this person, well, then they become your responsibility, because that's a choice that you made. And taking responsibility is always based off of your actions and your choices. I'm not responsible for someone else's children. That's just the long and short of it. They are, because it is their direct product. It's not just their direct product like it came from her egg cell and his sperm cell. I mean, there is no more direct product that you could possibly create that is your own children. Part of their DNA is yours. That's why you become responsible for its life. It didn't ask to be born, it didn't ask to be created, okay? And that's why you have to take responsibility for it, because it is yours. But some other person outside of you is not your responsibility unless you choose for it to become your responsibility. In the same way that if I choose to adopt a child and she goes off and does some cruel act, it then becomes my responsibility for her because I chose to have it, because I chose to adopt her. And if I choose to attach my kidney to someone else's kidney, and then I decide I don't want it anymore, then yes, that would 100 and totally percent be my fault if I detach myself from them because I'm not honoring the responsibility that I gave to myself. And that is wholly the difference. Women and men are responsible to their children because it is their direct product. But you can't be responsible to people that you don't know. I'm sorry, but that's just how our society works.
And you might be thinking, well, the arsonist should be punished. The implication is that if Tom doesn't go along with it, he'll be killed. And many who support state-enforced pregnancy, including Ben Shapiro, say if being pregnant is going to kill you, an abortion is allowable. But the threat against Tom isn't coming from his pregnancy, it's from outside. What if the police arrive, take the arsonist away for punishment, so the threat is gone, and Tom is still plugged in? Is it okay to remove him?
Yes!
Some people say, well, there's a difference between withdrawing treatment, like unplugging, and killing, like an abortion. But if your argument relies on this factual and moral distinction between killing versus letting die, then you are the one who needs to prove that distinction is there.
Killing would be purposefully and intentively and actively allowing for someone to die. Maybe even passively that could work. I mean, no, usually that doesn't work. Killing is oftentimes active, but letting someone die is passive. And sometimes you have to let people die if there's nothing that can be done to save them. Which sucks to say, but it's not the same thing as killing them. The distinction would be killing is an activity, while letting them die is a passive acceptance of them being killed. Now, if you were to create a scenario in which the person would be left to die without your hand being there, well, that would be impossible by definition because you created the scenario. For example, if you paid some guy to snipe some person you don't like while you were standing right next to them, so it makes it look like you didn't have a hand in it, and you let them die even though you could call the police, well, I would say that that's killing because you paid the sniper to kill them. If you concoct a scenario even though you are not the person who pulls the trigger, well, then you would be killing them. I think that's a pretty good distinction.
Which isn't as easy as it sounds, and doesn't even sound all that easy. And even if you do it, and you say, I support criminalizing abortion because it is killing as opposed to letting die, then that would mean that a pregnant person who starves themselves into stillbirth deliberately must be morally and legally okay.
Well, no, because according to the very distinction that I made, if you are actively creating a scenario in which something will die, even if it's not by your hand, which would you be starving yourself into a stillbirth, you would be killing it. Because it's a purposeful action or a purposefully inactive, I guess wouldn't be action, but inactive thing that you're doing in order to facilitate the death of something else. So yes, you would be killing it. So that should not be allowed, I don't think, if I understand what you're trying to say here.
Which I'm guessing Ben Shapiro doesn't want to say.
Moreover, what if Tom wasn't needed for a few hours, but a few years, or even the rest of his life? You might want to say, well, then unplugging would be okay, but if the life at stake is what matters, then that doesn't change, whether it's 9 months or 100 years. If you support state-forced pregnancy but think that Tom shouldn't be punished for unplugging after a certain point, then you've already agreed with the central claim of the pro-choice position, which is that bodily autonomy can take priority over a life.
No, I would totally and fundamentally disagree. The reason being that your bodily autonomy was used to facilitate the creation of the life to begin with, and that creation of the life did not have a hand in whether or not it wished to be born. And because it is a direct product of you and someone else, you two become responsible for it. That's the, I would say, close to the best way to articulate a pro-life argument. Your right to your bodily autonomy is not something that we as human beings could really control or even realistically legislate, because it's something totally outside of our parameters as humans. We can ask for women to become pregnant. We can ask for females to be the ones that produce eggs or hold eggs or lay on eggs or whatever, you know. That's just how it be. It is. And because the product, which is a child, requires a purposeful action, which is sexual activity, you become responsible for it. And because it is a living organism and a human, because it can't fucking be anything other than a human, it then has its own right to life. And thus, it should not be okay to kill them. That would probably be one of the best ways to articulate a pro-life argument, I think. Some people might be able to articulate better than me, but I think that might be the best way.
You're just haggling over who gets to draw the line and where.
What I like about Thompson's scenario is that it pushes us to that place of all or nothing.
No, it doesn't. Mostly because you're not focusing on the points that pro-lifers are trying to make. And you're not actually counter-arguing against the points that pro-lifers are trying to make. Those points being that you, being a living organism, has a right to live. And because it is a creation of two consenting adults, usually, rape, we can table that discussion for some other time, you don't have a right to kill it because its right to live supersedes your right to kill it. Unless, of course, that thing becomes an active threat to you. Which then I can understand why you think it would be okay to allow an abortion, but I don't really think anyone would be happy about that situation where your own child is actively killing you in some malformed way. But the long and short of it is, most abortions aren't like that. They're mostly done out of convenience. So, while we can talk about those extreme outliers, including rape and incest, which are also outliers, they don't make up the bulk of abortions, and they don't make up the bulk of what pro-lifers are arguing against. So arguing those specific points should be done and can be done, but they shouldn't be used as any excuse or any reason as to why mostly done out of convenience or just simply not wanting a child, which is the main bulk of the reason why abortions take place.
If you're Ben Shapiro, you have to agree with the arsonist and say that no matter how Tom came to be there, and no matter how much he suffers, a human life is at stake, and unplugging him should be criminal. If a woman or a trans person with a womb can be forced by the state to use her body to keep someone else alive, it must also be acceptable to force a man to do the same thing.
And so, my friends, I think I'm going to have to end the video here and wrap us up with a third part. But that third part should probably be really, really short, relatively speaking. So that being said, I just hope you guys got something out of today's video, and if you did, man, you're going to click the like button. Actually, go and click that subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below. As always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.